Good evening. How's everybody doing? Let's light up the darkness. Who's in the house? Stephen in New Hampshire. Yehudit in South Carolina. No. Yehudit in Budapest. Shandora in the Bronx. Melissa in Great Neck. Tracy in Oklahoma. Bella in Florida. David in South Bend. Joseph in Massachusetts. Ryan in Jacksonville. Jonathan back in SoCal. Aoife in Florida. Ella in the house. Marjorie in Georgia. Welcome, everybody. We're going to move closer to getting caught up. We'll do highlights from 3 pages today, and that'll put us 2 pages behind the official Daf Yomi schedule. All right. So our Dafs today are pages 65 through 67 here in Tractate Gittin, the 19th volume of the Talmud. Generally speaking, the laws of divorce, and we are talking about the laws of divorce after an extended digression that we went through for a few weeks. We picked this up on 65a. We are in chapter 6, and we're going to finish chapter 6 today. So it's a bunch of Mishnayos. We begin with Mishnah number 4. In the case of a minor girl who said to an agent, "Receive my bill of divorce for me," it is not a valid bill of divorce until the bill of divorce reaches her possession. Now, that's really what we're talking about here is a young girl who her father betrothed her to a man. They aren't actually married yet, but a betrothal, to break it off, requires a get. It requires a bill of divorce. The father can accept the get for her. If the husband changes his mind and wants to break off the betrothal, the father betrothed the girl, the father can accept the get for her. The father can appoint an agent to receive the get for her. She cannot appoint an agent to receive the get because she's a minor. She can't appoint her own agent. Therefore, if the husband seeks to retract his decision before his wife or his betrothed receives the bill of divorce, he can retract it, as a minor does not designate an agent. Consequently, the agent is not an agent for receipt, and the divorce does not take effect when the husband hands the get to the agent. The agent is only an agent for delivery, and the divorce takes effect when the get enters the girl's possession. So remember, in terms of the wife or the betrothed, she can appoint an agent either for delivery or for receipt. A minor girl can't appoint such an agent, but an adult woman can. And the difference between delivery and receipt is an important one that we discussed yesterday. For delivery, so she's just appointing an agent to pick up the get from the husband and bring it to her. She doesn't become divorced until she receives it. If she appoints an agent for receipt, then she is officially divorced when her agent of receipt receives the get. And if it's going to be an agent of receipt, there have to be 2 witnesses when she appoints that agent and 2 witnesses when that agent actually receives the get. And if her father said to the agent, "Go out and receive my daughter's bill of divorce on her behalf," then if the husband seeks to retract his decision, he cannot retract it. Because once the agent of receipt, appointed by the father in this case, because it's a minor girl, has received the get, that's it. The divorce has happened. The husband can no longer change his mind. As a father can receive the bill of divorce on behalf of his minor daughter, he can designate an agent for receipt. And the divorce takes effect when the husband hands the document to the agent. With regard to one who says, Nina, if you're listening, please bring me room temperature water. Thank you. With regard to one who says to an agent, "Give this bill of divorce to my wife in such and such a place," if the agent deviated and gave it to her in another place, the divorce is not valid. Listen to that. With regard to one who says to an agent, "Give this get to my wife in such and such a place," if the agent deviated and gave it to the wife, but not in the place that the husband had specified, then the divorce is not valid. Why? Because once the agent deviates from his instructions, he cancels his own agency. However, if the husband said to the agent, give this bill of divorce to my wife, she is in such and such a place, without explicitly instructing the agent to give, thank you so much, honey. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shakol v'dirot. Still healing from the oral surgery. Okay. So, but if the husband said to his agent, give this get to my wife, she is in such and such a place, without explicitly instructing the agent to give her the document in that place, and the agent gave it to his wife in a different place than the one that the husband mentioned where he thought his wife would be, then the divorce is valid, right? Because what he said is, give the get to my wife. She's in such and such a place. That's just to help the agent find her. If the agent then finds her somewhere else, he's following his agency, the instructions of his agency, when he gives it to her. But if the instructions of agency were give it to her in such and such a place, and he gives it to her in a different place, then he violated his agency and it's canceled. With regard to the woman who, when designating her agent for receipt, said to her agent, receive my get for me in such and such a place, and he received it for her in another place, the divorce is not valid. But Rabbi Elazar deems it valid. If she said to him, bring me my get from such and such a place, and he brought it to her from a different place, it is valid, because he is an agent for delivery, not for receipt. The woman is not particular where he receives the bill of divorce, as the divorce only takes effect when the bill of divorce reaches her possession. That's Mishnah number 4. The Gemara. And the Gemara asks, and according to Rabbi Elazar, what is different in the first clause when the agent deviated from the husband's instructions and delivered the bill of divorce in a different place where he does not disagree with the unattributed opinion of the first Tana, with the first rabbi in the Mishnah, the divorce is not valid because the agent of the husband deviated from the instruction, give it to her in such and such a place. And Rabbi Elazar agreed with that. But what is different than the latter clause of the Mishnah, where the agent deviated from the wife's instructions and received the bill of divorce in a different place than she said, that Rabbi Elazar disagrees with the unattributed opinion of the first rabbi, and he deems that divorce valid. Why does Rabbi Elazar only disagree where the wife's agent deviated from receive it in such and such a place, that the divorce is valid? And the Gemara answers, he, the husband who divorces his wife of his own volition, insists that the divorce be effected in a certain place. However, she, the wife, who is divorced even against her will, because this is not an equal playing field in terms of who has the option to divorce, she, the wife who is divorced even against her will, she cannot insist with regard to the manner in which the divorce will be effected, right? The husband is performing the action of giving the get, so he can pick the place. She can't pick the place where she will receive the get. Anywhere that the husband hands it to her, she becomes divorced. So she can't be, she can't create an instruction for the agent that she herself doesn't have the power to enforce. And that's the Gemara on Mishnah number 4. Mishnah 5. An Israelite woman married to a priest partakes of terumah. Terumah, food consecrated, given as the first tithe, the tithe for the kohen, for the priest, which only priests can eat, and only when the terumah is tahor, is ritually pure, and the priest himself is ritually pure, and his household, right? So an Israelite woman married to a priest, she eats terumah. If she says to an agent, bring me my bill of divorce. So she has designated her agent as an agent of delivery for the get. So she continues to partake of terumah until the get actually reaches her hand. However, if she says, receive my bill of divorce, so now she has appointed an agent for receipt, so that when he receives the get for her on her behalf, she is divorced at that moment. then this wife of a priest is immediately prohibited from partaking of terumah. Why? Since the divorce takes effect as soon as the husband hands the bill of divorce to the agent, the concern is that the agent encountered the husband nearby. If the woman said to the agent, receive my bill of divorce from me in such and such a place, then even if he received it elsewhere, she continues to partake of terumah until the bill of divorce reaches that place. And Rabbi Elazar prohibits her from partaking of terumah immediately. Right, so she can't eat terumah. Once she's divorced, she can no longer eat terumah. And so if she appoints an agent for receipt, we're concerned that the agent runs into the husband right away. And from that moment, she can no longer eat terumah. She can't be sure that that didn't happen. So as soon as she appoints an agent of receipt and he leaves her house, she can no longer eat terumah. Where am I? And that's Mishnah number 5. Okay. Now we're going to skip forward onto 65b. So with regard to one who says to his agent, establish an eruv, right? A joining of Shabbos boundaries so that I can carry from one place to another. And when you establish an eruv, like we learned in Tractate Eruvin, the way that you establish an eruv, I mean, obviously there's many, many laws and rules and nuances that we learn, but one thing that has to be done to establish an eruv is that a basket containing two meals for Shabbos, which aren't actually eaten, but they could be eaten, they get deposited in one place within the eruv. And so, like the people within the eruv, I'm sorry, the law is you can only walk 2,000 cubits from your home or from the edge of the city on Shabbos. So if you want to move your domicile on Shabbos so that you can walk 2,000 cubits, because you want to go to your friend's house for lunch on Shabbos who lives 3,000 cubits away. So if I walk 2,000 cubits out my front door, I won't reach his house. But if I join the boundaries by establishing my domicile halfway between me and my friend, by depositing this basket of food somewhere, that's gonna serve as my Shabbos domicile. Then I can walk, let's say, 1,500 cubits to where the basket is, and 1,500 cubits beyond. So now my friend's house is within my range, right? So establishing the eruv. Now to do that, I have to actually deposit that basket of food somewhere. Now if I appoint an agent to deposit the eruv, right, in this case the food that allows the joining of boundaries, he has to follow my instructions. So that's what we're talking about here. All right, so with regard to one who says to his agent, establish an eruv with dates, right? So the food in the basket is going to be dates, right, from a date tree. And he established an eruv on behalf of the principal with dried figs instead of dates. Or if he said to his agent, establish an eruv on my behalf with dried figs, and the agent established the eruv on his behalf with dates. So it is taught in one baraisa, the eruv is still a valid eruv, but it is taught in a different baraisa, the eruv is not a valid eruv. And Rabbah said, La kasha, this is not difficult. This baraisa in which it is taught that it is not a valid eruv, so this is in accordance with the opinion of the rabbis. And that baraisa in which it is taught that it is a valid eruv is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Elazar. And so Rabbah explains, this baraisa is in accordance with the opinion of the rabbis who say, when one gives instructions to his agent, there is insistence on his part that the agent implement those instructions without deviation, right? As we saw in our Mishnah, if he says, give this get to my wife, at our home in Manhattan. But the agent learned that the wife was in the Hamptons, right? At their summer home. These are very wealthy people. And so the agent went to the Hamptons and gave the get to her there. So as we learned in the Mishnah, this is not a valid divorce because the agent didn't follow the instructions. Give her the get in our Manhattan apartment. And that was the instruction. When the agent went out to the Hamptons, he was exceeding the agency that had been created. Right? So the rabbis say that one who gives instructions to his agent insists on that the agent implement those instructions without deviation, and failure to do so revokes his designation as an agent. And the Baraisa that says that the eruv is a valid eruv, this is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Elazar, who says she is merely indicating a place for him to receive the bill of divorce and not stipulating that the divorce is contingent on receipt of the document in that place. In the Baraisa as well, this person who was saying, establish my eruv for me with dates, he's not so particular as to what food should be used to establish the eruv. He was just saying, do it with dates, but if it's done with figs, the eruv is still established, and so he will be happy with that. Rav Yosef says, both this Baraisa and that Baraisa are the opinion of the rabbis, who say when one gives instructions to his agent, there is insistence on his part that the agent implement the instructions without deviation. However, not all deviations are equal. Here, where the Baraisa rules that it is a valid eruv, the reference is to a case where the one who designated the agent instructed him to establish the eruv with his dates or dried figs, and the agent deviated and established the eruv with another type of fruit. But it belonged to the one issuing the instructions. So it doesn't really matter. He said dates, he said figs, he said do it with dates or figs, and the guy did it with pomegranates. It doesn't really matter. He followed his instructions close enough. But there, where the other Baraisa says that it is not a valid eruv, the reference is to a case where the one who said to his agent said, make an eruv for me with the dates or figs that belong to my buddy Bill. Okay? Now, presumably, Bill authorized this. But when the agent deviated and established the eruv with another type of fruit that belonged to Bill, now he's exceeded his authority. But if I said, establish my eruv with either figs or dates that belong to Bill, presumably I asked Bill, and Bill said, okay, you can use either my dates or my figs. My agent goes over there and takes pomegranates from Bill's garden. He might have just caused me some trouble. Bill never authorized that I should take his pomegranates. My agent went and took pomegranates. He's exceeded his agency, and that's why it's not a valid eruv. Now we skip down another couple paragraphs and another Mishnah, number 6 here in chapter 6. With regard to a husband who says to two people, write a get and give it to my wife, or he says, divorce her, or he says, write a letter and give it to her. So they should write the document and give it to her. In each of those cases, his intent is clear. He wants them to write a get and give it to the wife, right? So he's appointing them his agents to both write the get and deliver it to the wife. However, one who says to these people, release her, or sustain her, or treat her according to the law, or treat her appropriately. This person has said nothing. His statement is too ambiguous. It might be that in the context, you could tell that what he meant was write a get for my wife and I want to divorce her, but his instruction was not specific enough and we don't listen to him. If he wants to get a divorce, he's going to have to be clearer than that. And that's Mishnah number 6. Skip a couple paragraphs. A dilemma was raised before the sages. If the husband said, remove her, then what is the law? Or if he said, abandon her, then what? Or if he said, unbind her, then what? If he said, let her be, what is the law? If he said, be useful for her, what is the law? If he said, treat her according to the custom, what is the law? Now, in all of these cases, it could have been part of a conversation where within the conversation it was clear that the husband meant, write a get for her, write a get, I don't want to be married anymore, I want a divorce. Should I really write the get for her? Yes, treat her according to the law. The agent says, should I really write a get for her? And the husband says, yes, abandon her. Or, yeah, should I really write a get, etc. Nevertheless, his instruction was too ambiguous at least for us to be certain. Right? These cases are actually not resolved. The Gemara doesn't say he has said nothing, like the Mishnah said about certain kinds of statements. This is kind of a third category. This is neither clear enough to create the divorce, nor unclear enough to be sure that he didn't create a divorce. And so the Gemara doesn't resolve those instructions. They're just too unclear. But the Gemara does answer, well, resolve at least one of those expressions, as it is taught in the Baraisa, one who said, treat her according to the custom, or treat her according to the law, or treat her appropriately. This person has said nothing, and it is not a valid bill of divorce. So apparently the expression, treat her according to the custom, is not an unequivocal instruction to effect divorce. Now the Gemara didn't resolve those other formulations, remove her, abandon her, unbind her. So if the husband gave that instruction and they knew from the context that he meant divorce her, and they wrote a get and delivered it, is she really divorced? There would probably be a suffix. There would be a doubt. And they would probably force him to do the procedure over again. If he died in the meantime, they would, and he didn't have children, they would force her to perform chalitza with his brother, so that she wouldn't have any obligation toward the brother under the law of yibum, but they wouldn't allow her to perform yibum with the brother, levirate marriage, because there was a doubt whether she was divorced before she was widowed. And that concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 6. Here's Mishnah number 7. At first, the sages would say, in the case of one who is taken out in a neck chain to be executed, right? He's going out in shackles to be executed. And this man said to the bystanders, write a bill of divorce for my wife. And that's all he managed to say. So the question is, if you say in a normal context, write a bill of divorce for my wife, so your agent, right, or the person who's hearing your instruction has now been enabled, has been empowered to write a get, not to deliver it to the wife. But a person who is at death's door, or a person who's about to be taken out to be executed, or a person who's going to war, or a person who's going on a dangerous journey overseas. In all these cases, we're concerned that he was distracted because he's about to die or about to go into battle, etc. And he didn't finish the statement, write my wife a get and give it to her. And the reason the husband is doing that is because he loves his wife. If he's taken out to be executed, right, but they're not, the bystanders just seeing him being taken out of the prison, and it might be that he gets executed, in some dark corner of the forest, and then, the bad guys just dump his body, and he never returns, and no one is sure whether he was actually executed or not. In that situation, his wife would become an agunah. She would become a deserted wife who cannot remarry because there's no proof that her husband died and that she's a widow. So her husband is seeking to protect her from that. He thinks that could happen to him, so he says, write a bill of divorce for my wife. That's all he manages to say. We understand that he's doing it as a benefit to his wife, and based only on the instruction, write her a get, what does the Mishnah say? If he only said, write a get for my wife, these people who hear him should write the get and give it to his wife. And so she's divorced, even though there was no explicit instruction to give it to her. The sages then said, right, at first the sages would say that. Later they said, even with regard to one who sets sail and one who departs in a caravan to a far off place, right? So the Mishnah only talked about one who is taken out in neck irons to the place of execution. Only he can say, write a get, and we both write it and deliver it. Later they expanded this law to cover some other cases, that even with regard to one who sets sail and one who departs in a caravan to a far off place, who says, write a get for my wife, his intention is to write the get and give it to his wife, and the people who hear his instruction can do so. Rabbi Shimon Shazuri says, even if one who is dangerously ill, gives that instruction, they write the get and give it to his wife. And certainly one who is on his deathbed and is clearly going to die, but even one who is dangerously ill that could die, who says, write her a bill of divorce, he's treated like the one taken out in irons, and we both write it and give it to her. That's Mishnah 7. Now, the Gemara. The Gemara relates Geneva, right? We met Geneva yesterday. Geneva was this sage, right? He was one of the Amoraim in Bavel, in Babylonia, whose Torah was quite respected, but he was also a very contentious and argumentative man whose midos, right? His personal characteristics were not so well respected as his learning, and in fact, he met an untimely end. He was executed by the Persian authorities who were in charge of Bavel because, he brought it on himself, let's say. So Geneva was one who went out in a neck chain to be executed. And when he was going out, he said to the people there, as his dying bequest, give 400 dinars to Rabbi Avina from wine that I have in the city of Neharpanya. And Rabbi Zera said, now we're on 66a, let Rabbi Avina lift his basket and go to Rav Huna, his teacher, as in order to acquire this item, he must rely on the opinion of his teacher. As Rav Huna said, the legal status of one's bill of divorce is like that of his gift, meaning, just as with regard to a gift given by one on his deathbed, if he recovered from his illness and arose from his deathbed, he revokes the gift. So too, with regard to his bill of divorce given by one on his deathbed, if he recovered from his illness and arose from his deathbed, he revokes the bill of divorce. Right? One on his deathbed who's about to die and his wife is going to become a widow anyway, if he says, give her a get, what is the concern? She's not going to be an aguna if he dies. So why is he doing this? I mean, it might be that he doesn't want her to inherit, but wives don't inherit in the same way that, community property is inherited in modern times. Right, under ancient law, the son inherits. The wife is sustained from the estate if she's a widow, but she receives her ketubah payment in a different way if she's divorced. However, what the husband might be wanting to do as he lies there dying is to free her from having to perform chalitza. Right? So if on his deathbed he says, write a get for her, right? We do that, we write it and we give it to her so she's divorced. But according to this, if he recovers, then that get is revoked. Now that's not a universal opinion, but that's what it says here. Where did the law come out on this? If a person on his deathbed writes over all his property as a gift to another and subsequently recovers, he may revoke that gift. He was only giving it away because he thought he was dying. Then he doesn't die, he can revoke that gift. What about the get? If a man on his deathbed wrote a get for his wife and he divorced her, had it written and given to her, then even if he recovered, he cannot retract the divorce, which is what we would want, right? Because she can't think she's divorced and then not divorced. Because the laws of a get are not parallel to the laws of a gift, in accordance with the opinion of Rava. That's where this law is going to end up. Right? And so the Gemara says, and just as with regard to the get of one on his deathbed, even though he did not specify, once he said, write the get, even though he did not say, give it to my wife, they write it and give it to her. So too, with regard to a gift given by one on his deathbed, once he said, give the gift, even though the recipients did not acquire the item from him by means of an active acquisition, a kinyan, the one on his deathbed has given the gift. Based on the parallel drawn by Rav Huna between a bill of divorce and a gift, Rabbi Avina can go and collect the gift given him by Geneva. So he could collect. A get is not retractable, right? A get is not retractable once somebody says on his deathbed, give it to her. Then even though he gets better, he can marry his wife again if she hasn't married in the meantime, but the divorce is not revoked. And that's all we're going to say about Mishnah number 7. Mishnah number 8. Aren't we flying now? With regard to one who was thrown into a pit, and he thought that he would die there. And he said that anyone who hears his voice should write a get for his wife. And he specified his name, her name, and all the relevant details. So those who hear him should write the get and give it to his wife, even though they do not see the man and they do not know him. Right? So this is similar to the guy in the neck chain being taken out to execution. He's afraid that he will, be killed, but his body won't be recovered, and there won't be witnesses to his death, and his wife will become an agunah. So to protect her, he says, write a get, and they do. Now we have this man in a pit, and the passerby says, hello up there. I'm stuck in here. I don't know if I'll ever get out. My name is such and such. My wife's name is such and such. Write her a get. So this passerby writes the get and delivers it to the wife. I mean, there's going to have to be multiple passersby so that there's witnesses to this event. But even though they didn't actually see the guy, we listen to him. So we see that this is a real protection of the wife, that the sages are kind of like stretching the law a little bit to protect her. Now, what's the concern? The Gemara asks, but let us be concerned that perhaps the source of the voice in the pit is a demon, as no one saw the person in the pit. Rav Yehuda says, now this is referring to a case where they saw that the being in the pit has human form. They just couldn't make out who it was, but they could tell that there was a human down there. But the Gemara objects. Demons too can appear in human form. And therefore the fact that the being in the pit looked like a human is not proof that it is not a demon. And the Gemara explains, it is a case where they saw that he has a shadow. And the Gemara objects again. Demons also have a shadow. But the Gemara explains, it is a case where they saw that he has the shadow of a shadow. And the Gemara objects again, and perhaps demons also have the shadow of a shadow. And Rabbi Hanina says, Yonatan, my son, taught me that demons have a shadow, but they do not have the shadow of a shadow. What is the shadow of a shadow? Says Rav Steinsaltz, some explain that the word shadow refers to a shadow that is the same size as the person casting the shadow. However, Rashi, in Tractate Avodah Zarah 47a, says that a longer shadow is not as clear and is referred to as the shadow of the shadow. Others explain that when the light is not strong, there is only a primary shadow, but a secondary, less vivid shadow, this is called the shadow of a shadow. Apparently, demons lack substance, and they appear like dense air or an optical illusion, and therefore they do not have the shadow of a shadow. Today, we're moving fast. We're not going to go too much into Talmudic notions of demonology. You don't hear about demons in the Mishnah very much at all, but you definitely hear about them in the Gemara. You don't hear about them very much in the Jerusalem Talmud. You do hear about demons in a bunch of places in the Talmud Bavli, in the Babylonian Talmud. And this idea that there are demons running around, that they're dangerous, like a classic teaching is do not enter a ruin alone because of the danger of demons, but alone. So if two people enter the ruin, then they are not in danger, which I find very interesting, that demons tend to attack isolated people, not people who are in community, even a tiny community of two. you're not as vulnerable as somebody who is alone. People who are isolated are more susceptible to demons. I think that's an interesting teaching. The Gemara asks, but perhaps the source of the voice in the pit is not a demon, but rather is a rival wife of the woman who is to be divorced. It's a man has two wives, and the rival wife would like to get rid of her co-wife. So she hides in this pit and shouts up in the voice of her husband, divorce this woman, my name is so-and-so, the husband's name, my wife is the co-wife, and in that way she can get rid of her co-wife. What a plot that would be. So based on that mistaken belief, she seeks to cause her rival to receive a bill of divorce under false pretenses, leading her to believe that she is divorced. The rival wife won't be divorced, of course, but she thinks she's divorced. And based on that mistaken belief, she will remarry without a divorce and will then become forbidden to both her first and second husband. It's a truly wicked plot that this rival wife might be hatching. And the Gemara answers, a sage from the school of Rabbi Yishmael taught, during a time of danger, when there is the likelihood that the wife would assume deserted wife status, one writes and gives the get, even though the people instructed to do so are not familiar with the man who gave the instructions. And here too, when a voice is heard from a pit, one writes and gives the bill of divorce, as there is no possibility of properly clarifying the issue. And this idea that the rival wife put herself in a pit, to hatch this plot to put her co-wife in a terrible situation is so unlikely. It's much more likely that there's some guy trapped, going to be enslaved, taken by marauding soldiers or armies or something like that, and he's trying to save his wife from becoming an aguna, so we listen to his instruction. And that completes our discussion of Mishnah number 8. Mishnah number 9. A healthy man who said, write a bill of divorce for my wife, but he did not say to give it to her, presumably sought to mock her. I don't know if he presumably sought to mock her. In other words, he wants to scare her. Here's your bill of divorce. Let's get our marriage back on track or I'm going to give it to you. I wouldn't call that mocking, but the point is he wrote the bill of divorce. Maybe he's thinking about it. He's contemplating it. He's threatening, but he didn't give it to her, right? So a healthy man who's not on his deathbed, who said, write a bill of divorce, we don't give it to her because he just wanted it written. And the Mishnah relates, there was an incident involving a healthy man who said, write a get for my wife, and then he ascended to the roof and fell, and he died. So Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says, if the man fell at his own initiative, meaning he committed suicide by jumping off the roof, then this is a valid bill of divorce, as it is clear that he anticipated his death and he instructed those listening to write the get with the intent of giving it to her. However, if he fell by accident, then it is not a valid get, as there was no clear intent to give her the get when he gave the instruction, write the get. That's Mishnah number 9. The Gemara relates. I skip a couple paragraphs. The Gemara relates. There was a certain man who entered the synagogue, and he found the school teacher and his son who were sitting there. And there was another person there with them. Right? So there were 3 people in the synagogue. 2 of them are a father and son. The father's a school teacher, and his son, adult son, and this other guy. Right? So 3 people are sitting there. And the man says to them, 2 of you should write a get for my wife. Ultimately, the school teacher died. So the sage is considered the following question. Do people designate a son as an agent in the presence of his father, even though the 2 of them could not serve together as witnesses because they are relatives or not? Right? 3 people were sitting in the synagogue. The husband came in and he said, 2 of you write a get and give it to my wife. Now, The father and son cannot be the two people because they're related to each other. The witnesses can't be related to each other. So the only pairs of witnesses that would work would be the father and the third man, or the son and the third man. The question they're saying is, if this guy came in and said, two of you write a get, would he have contemplated that the son could be one of the two? Why would he not contemplate that? Because, just like I act as a gabbai in our synagogue, right, and I call people up for an aliyah. So it's like giving them the honor of calling them for an aliyah to make a blessing and have the public Torah reading. So if a father and son are in the room, usually I'm going to call the father, unless I have a reason to call the son, right? You don't honor a son in front of his father when you could be honoring the father. So if you wouldn't designate a son as your agent, sort of doing him the honor of saying, look, you're a trustworthy person, please be my agent in this. If people don't contemplate designating a son as an agent in the presence of his father, then we would say, well, the son can't function that way. And since the father died and he didn't have in mind that the son could do it, so then they can't write the get for him because it doesn't work. Or people do designate a son in front of his father, and therefore, it occurred to him it could be the teacher and the third man, or the son and the third man. Either way, it doesn't matter to him, but just two people out of this group, please go write the get and give it to her. So that's the question that the sages are considering. So Rav Nachman said, people do not designate a son as an agent in the presence of his father. And Rav Papi said, people do designate a son as an agent in the presence of his father. And Rav has said that the halacha is, people designate a son as an agent in the presence of his father. And again, this ends up being a leniency, often to protect the woman, but basically it's real, right? It's reality. And sometimes I will, especially as a father and son in Armenian, they are kohanim, right? There's not so many kohanim, and so you need a kohen to come up and take the first aliyah. So, am I going to call the father every week? Sometimes I'm going to call the son, even though the father is there, right? And it's the same idea. Sometimes you will designate the son. Maybe it's more convenient for the son to travel than it would be for the father. Maybe it's more convenient for the son to go right now, and the father's going to be busy. For whatever reason, sometimes you designate the son as the agent. And that concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 9. Here's the last Mishnah of our chapter, Mishnah number 10. If a man said to two people, give a bill of divorce to my wife, or if a man said to three people, bill of divorce and get are the same, right? So sometimes I say get, sometimes I say bill of divorce, but it's easier to say get. So if a man said to two people, give a get to my wife, or if a man said to three people, write a get and give it to my wife, these people should write the document themselves and give it to her. If the husband said to three people, give a get to my wife, these people should tell others, and those others will write the get, because he designated the three people as a court. This is the statement of Rabbi Meir. And it is that law that Rabbi Hanina of Ono brought up from prison in the name of Rabbi Akiva. Right? When Rabbi Akiva, toward the end of his life, was imprisoned by the Romans for teaching Torah publicly after they banned it. So Rabbi Hanina of Ono brought this teaching from Rabbi Akiva when Akiva was in prison. Says Rabbi Hanina of Ono, in the name of Rabbi Akiva, I received the tradition from my teachers that in a case where a man says to three people, give a get to my wife, that these people should tell others, and those others will write the document, because he designated the three people as a court. Rabbi Yosei said, we said no menu to the agent. And Rabbi Hanina of Ono, we too received the tradition. However, it is a different one, that even if a man said to the high court in the Sanhedrin in Jerusalem, give a get to my wife, that the members of the court should learn to write and should write the document themselves and give it to his wife. Not that because there are three people that they become a court to administrate over this proceeding, but rather, even if he said to an actual court, write this get for my wife and give it to her, then these, even though they're judges of the Sanhedrin, now they're not going to function as judges. They're going to function as, his agents to, have a scribe write up that's the question. That's another question. They're not supposed to hire a scribe. They're supposed to write the get themselves and make sure that she gets it, not act as a court administering over this, and then they would go and secure witnesses and the scribe. Continues the Mishnah, if a man said to 10 people, write and give a get to my wife. So one of the 10 writes the get and 2 sign it as witnesses. If the husband said, all of you write the get, so then one of them writes the get and all of them sign it. Therefore, if one of them died, then this get is null and void, as he directed all of them to participate in the process, and one of them died before he could participate. That's Mishnah number 10. The Gemara. Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba says, after Rav's death, they sent a question from the study hall of Rav to Shmuel. Let our teacher teach us. In a case where a man said to 2 people, write and give a get to my wife, and they told the scribe, and he wrote the get, and they signed it. What is the law? Right? He said to 2 people, write a get and give it to my wife. Can they then go and hire a scribe to write out the get? Or let's say that's what they did. They hired a scribe to write the get. So what is the law? And they signed it, right? They hired a scribe to write it. They signed it as the witnesses. So what is the law? So the question went from Rav to Shmuel. So Shmuel sent the response. If the woman remarried on the basis of this get, she should leave her second husband. And the matter requires study, meaning there's a doubt here. We're not sure. And because there's a doubt in matters of prohibited relationships, we're going to be very stringent. It is necessary to clarify the law as there is a fundamental uncertainty with regard to this matter. And the Gemara asks, what is the meaning of the matter requires study? What aspect of this question requires study? If we say that the uncertainty arises due to the fact that these are verbal directives, as the husband merely gave instructions. He said to 2 people, write a get and give it to my wife. So that was a verbal instruction. And he did not hand them anything tangible. And Shmuel is uncertain whether verbal directives, instructions given to one agent, are transferred to another agent, or whether verbal directives are not transferred to another agent. And this leads to the question of whether the agents designated by the husband to write the get can designate the scribe to write it. But that cannot be the question. And the Gemara explains why not. But didn't Shmuel say that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, Rebbe, says, the law is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yosef, who said verbal directives cannot be delegated to an agent, i.e., an agent cannot be deputized to give instructions on behalf of another. And Shmuel was not uncertain concerning this issue. Rather, this is the dilemma that Shmuel is raising. When the man told the 2 people, write the get, the question is whether he was referring to their signatures, in which case they could designate the scribe to write the document, or whether he was referring to writing the text of the get, in which case it would be incumbent upon them alone to write and sign the document. Did the husband say to those 2 people, you, meaning one of you, write the get yourself, and then both of you sign it? Or was he saying, have a get written, I don't care whether you write it or a scribe writes it, and then you 2 sign it when it's delivered? And the Gemara answers, wait a minute. And the Gemara asks, but let Shmuel resolve this dilemma from our Mishnah. If a man said to 2 people, give a get to my wife, or if a man said to 3 people, write a get and give it to my wife, these people should write the document themselves and give it to her. So apparently they must write the get themselves. And the Gemara answers, the proper interpretation of the Mishnah itself is the dilemma that Shmuel is raising. When the man told the 2 people, write the get, was he referring to their signatures, or was he referring to writing the actual text of the get? And the Gemara explains it is obvious that it is referring to the writing of the get, as it is taught in the latter clause of the Mishnah. The Rabbi Yosei said, we said to the agent, Rabbi Hanina of Ono, we too received a tradition that even if a man said to the Sanhedrin in Jerusalem, give a get to my wife, the members of the court should learn to write like a scribe and should write the document themselves and give it to his wife. Because obviously, if you're saying that the members of the Sanhedrin have to learn how to write, you're not saying that members of the Sanhedrin don't even know how to sign their names. It must be that they don't know the specific text that's required in a get. That's not their area of the law when they became judges. So they could rely on a scribe for that because, obviously they know how to sign their names. So if we're saying, no, they have to do it themselves, they can't rely on a scribe, so that they, even if they don't know how to write a get, they have to learn how to write a get. It must be that when somebody says to 2 or 3 people, write a get, what he means is you guys write it, not you can hire a scribe and have it written. And the Gemara will introduce some, a little challenge to that and say, well, wait a minute, maybe you can say that members of the Sanhedrin don't know how to sign their names. You're like, what? How could members of the Sanhedrin not know how to sign their names? And what they mean is maybe they're young judges who haven't developed a publicly recognizable signature yet. But they actually dismiss that as a concern. And the bottom line is, if you say to somebody, write a get, what you mean is you write it. That's where the law comes out. We skip down to page 67a. With regard to the previously cited matter itself, Shmuel says that Rebbe says the law is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yosei, who says verbal directives cannot be delegated to an agent, right? You can't instruct an agent to give instructions to someone else to carry out the mission. An agent, he can maybe designate a further agent to carry a package and make sure it gets delivered, maybe. But what he can't do is transmit verbal directives, according to this opinion of Rabbi Yosef. Now, Rabbi Shimon, the son of Rebbe, said before his father, since Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Hanina of Ono, who hold that verbal directives can be delegated to an agent, disagree with Rabbi Yosei, who says verbal directives cannot be transmitted by the agent, so then what led Rebbe to say that the law is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yosei, with whom he disagrees on this issue? Rebbe said to his son, be silent, my son, be silent. You did not see Rabbi Yosei. As if you had seen him, you would know that his reasoning accompanies his statements. Therefore, I deem his opinion most reliable. And even though I may not agree with him on certain things, whatever Rabbi Yosei says is the law, we're going to follow that. Rabbi Yosei was held in very high esteem by the other sages, including Rebbe, who redacted the Mishnah. And this is as it is taught in a Baraisa, that Issi ben Yehuda would recount the praises of the sages by characterizing each of them. Here's a very pithy little statements that give you a little bit sense of who these sages were. Rabbi Meir, right, who anonymous Mishnahs are understood to have been formulated by Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir, a scholar and a scribe. That's about the highest praise you could give. Rabbi Yehuda, a scholar when he chooses to be one. Meaning Rabbi Yehuda, in certain areas, his opinion is gold, but not in every area. Rabbi Tarfon, a pile of nuts. A pile of nuts? Who wants to be called that? Meaning, just as when one removes a nut from a pile, all the other nuts fall. So too, when a student would ask Rabbi Tarfon with regard to one matter, he would cite sources from all the disciplines of Torah. Rabbi Tarfon's breadth of knowledge was immense. Rabbi Yishmael, he is a well-stocked store, meaning that if you asked Rabbi Yishmael a question, he had his answers ready. He was prepared to answer a question on almost any area of the law right away. Rabbi Kiva, a full storehouse. Rabbi Kiva kind of knew it all, but he wouldn't have the answer ready at hand. He would tell you, let me think about that. And then he would come back to you with the right answer. But he didn't have it ready at hand like Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, a peddler's basket, in which there is a small amount of each product, right? He's got answers, but in a more limited area. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, a basket of fragrant spices, as everything he says is reasonable. The Mishna of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov is measured and immaculate. Very few areas of the law, very few rulings, but not challengeable in those areas. And Rabbi Yosef, his reasoning accompanies his statements. Not only is he always right, but you understand why he is right. And Rabbi Shimon grinds much and removes little. When Rabbi Shimon heard this, he was a little bit offended. But it was taught in explanation that what Issi ben Yehuda meant is that Rabbi Shimon would forget very little of his studies. And what he did forget, it was good to remove from his memory so it wouldn't be cluttered. Anything that he forgot wasn't worth remembering. And likewise, Rabbi Shimon said to his students, my sons, accept my halachic rulings, as my rulings are the finest rulings of the finest rulings of Rabbi Akiva. Okay, we skip forward. We're on 67b. I'm just about to be done. If you got questions or comments, please get them in. And with this, we're going to finish chapter 6. A dilemma was raised before the sages. If the husband said, write a get, and he enumerated the people that he was talking to, right? We're in the case of where he said to 10 people, right? Write a get for my wife. So if he said that to 10 people, one of them writes it and two of them sign it. If he says, all of you write a get for my wife and give it to her, then one of them writes it and all 9 have to sign it. And if one of them dies before he can sign it, this get is null and void. That's what the Mishnah said. Now, so a dilemma was raised before the sages. If the husband said, write a bill of divorce, and he enumerated them by name. So he's talking to 10 people, and then he names each of them. Then what is the law? Can one of them write the bill of divorce on behalf of them all? Or perhaps it is comparable to a situation where one says, all of you write, when it must be written in the presence of all of them. And Rav Huna says, if one enumerated them by name, it is not comparable to saying all of you. Rabbi Yochanan says in the name of Rabbi Elazar of Rome, if one enumerated each of them by name, it is comparable to saying all of you write it, meaning all of you sign it. So Rav Papa said, and they do not disagree, this is referring to a case where he enumerated all of them, and that is referring to a case where he enumerated only some of them. So some say that the distinction between the cases should be explained like this, and some say in that. Meaning some explain that the distinction is that if he enumerated all the members of this group of 10, he insists that they all participate. But if he enumerated only some of them, he does not insist that they do so, that all of them participate, rather that the ones who enumerated, they have to participate. If he enumerated the names that he did only to indicate that he wants the people performing the task to be chosen from the group that he named by name. Others explain that if he enumerated only some of them, he thereby expressed his intent that they alone participate. But if he enumerated them all, but did not say all of you, then this is not the case. So that's a little bit unclear, and you would hope that when a husband is doing something so serious as divorcing his wife, he would be clear about his intent, unless he's in some kind of distress situation, like rushing off to war, getting on a ship, on his deathbed, in a pit, etc. Otherwise, do it properly. Go to a Beis Din, get your witnesses, get your scribe, and just do everything the way the Beis Din tells you how to do it. That's what I've got for us today. Let's check some questions and comments. David, what if it is the wife who initiated the divorce? Would she send a get to the husband? No, that's not the way that Jewish law works, right? And we, at a certain point, I think Rabbi Gershon initiated like about 1,000 years ago that she can't be divorced against her will, right? So they're going to have to like sort of work together on it. But nevertheless, a wife does not give a get to a husband. It is halacha, Jewish law, as it's stated in the Torah, that the husband gives a get to the wife. Jonathan, here's a question, Ray execution. Was it better to be a widow or be divorced? Meaning, was it a good thing to divorce her before you die? Right, and as we mentioned, it's better in case there's not going to be witnesses to the execution. If there's going to be witnesses to the execution and everyone knows that the guy is killed, and can testify to that, well then, then she'll become a widow and she can remarry. The concern is that he'll be taken to be executed and there won't be witnesses and we can't be sure that he was executed. Maybe he's rotting in a prison somewhere and we can't be sure, and therefore she cannot remarry, and she might be in that state for the rest of her life. So to protect her from that, the husband who might end up in that situation says, write her a get, meaning let her be divorced so that she can remarry and get on with her life. Joe Branson, in our society, a man can be declared to be legally dead after 7 years. Has something like this been implemented by a Beis Din? Not to my knowledge, right? The leniency that they established and we read in, what tract? When was it? Right, was it in Nedarim or in Sota? Right, but it's what we talked about, right? That you can remarry based on the testimony of a single witness. Normally, you need 2 witnesses to establish that the guy died, in order for her to be free to remarry. But maybe, he fell in a war somewhere and just one guy comes back from overseas and says, I saw your husband die. Now, she can remarry based on the testimony of a single witness, but she's taking the risk that if the husband does come back, she's going to have to divorce the new husband. And if they had children, those children would be mamzers, and she would be prohibited to both the second husband and the first husband. So, the stakes are extremely high. So she's going to have to investigate to the best of her ability to make sure the husband really is dead and that this one witness is trustworthy. But that's the leniency. I don't think there's a statute of limitations. Who knows? Maybe that husband was imprisoned and he's there for 20 years and he's going to come back after 20 years. They don't know. And so it's a very difficult situation. Sharon, can a son write a get for his mother on behalf of his father? Sounds crazy. Can the son be appointed as one of these 2 people? It's a good question. I think maybe he can do the writing. I don't know that he can be a witness because he's related to the father. I'm not sure that the father can use his own relatives to be the witnesses for handing the get to the wife. But it's a good question. Okay, that's what I've got for us today. With God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow. Tuesday at the regular time, and tomorrow's a busy day, but we're just 2 pages behind the Daf Yomi schedule, so tomorrow or soon we'll try to do another 3-page day and then we'll be caught up.